They came for you at exactly 9:13 p.m., just as the frost touched the skylights above your glass-ceilinged atrium. You were holding a half glass of Lagavulin and staring out into the backyard where the floodlights painted the garden in shadows, and the sirens whispered like old secrets approaching from memory. The red and blue lights didn't flash in chaos. They pulsed in sync, as if invited. You knew they would come the night she stopped arguing. The calm wasn't peace. It was strategy. And the stillness in her voice carried the weight of something calculated. She said, "Maybe it's time you get some help." But her eyes were already watching a future without you in it. They thought you would resist, make a scene, speak in riddles, plead innocence. Instead, you placed your glass down, straightened your cufflinks, and walked toward the front door before they knocked. The officers hesitated, confused by your composure, but followed the script she'd rehearsed behind your back. She stood at the top of the staircase in her silk robe, one hand wrapped in her hair, the other clutching her phone. She didn't come down. She didn't need to. Her part was finished. The police were her proxy now. The handcuffs clicked too smoothly, as if your wrists had been measured. No aggression, no fight, just cold steel and the smell of gardenias blooming in the dark, like they didn't know this night would stain them forever. They read the charges: unstable behavior, dangerous threats, suspicion of premeditated sabotage. You nodded once, smiled like you had a secret. You did. The most dangerous one of all. The truth. They didn't see the flash of light in the bedroom window. They didn't know the house security was still streaming to your offshore server. They thought they were the only eyes in the room. Your silence felt like surrender, but silence was your blade. You knew every move had to happen exactly as it did, because you'd already seen it. Not in a dream. In code, in voice notes, in emails rerouted through shell accounts. She used your past. She manipulated your classified clearance. She painted you as paranoid because she was afraid of how right you actually were. They marched you through your own home like you didn't build it brick by brick from a decade of warfare disguised as business. As if your millions were some accidental stumble instead of years of blood-soaked negotiations in backlit rooms. Outside, the neighbors stood like tombstones, watching. Phones up, mouths tight, minds eager to believe the worst. You let them. You needed them to. The car doors slammed. The garage light flickered as if it, too, was holding its breath. They drove you away with no resistance, no speech. You didn't flinch when they locked the door. You didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, you saw her silhouette. No tears, just stillness, just triumph. You whispered into your cuff, barely audible over the cruiser's radio. The microphone was embedded inside the gold stitching of your blazer, her anniversary gift. The one she'd smugly insisted you wear tonight. It begins now. They thought they took your freedom. They activated your plan. The police didn't notice the flash drive in your belt buckle, or the GPS ping rerouted to a corporate competitor's email server. They didn't notice the officer driving you was one of yours, on leave, wearing the uniform of the city's finest with credentials traced back to a ghost precinct that hadn't existed since 2004. They thought this was justice, but justice doesn't come in sirens. It comes in silence, and your silence was the loudest sound in that car. They left her behind, thinking she'd won. She returned to the study where she'd stacked the manila folders labeled Exhibits AF. She poured herself wine, red, full-bodied. She exhaled, the kind of breath one takes when they think the game is over. She didn't hear the vibration on her phone that came from your shadow account. She didn't see the encryption key overwrite her storage drive and sync it to the remote terminal inside the prosecutor's office. She didn't know her celebratory playlist now contained audio she never recorded. But you did. You knew she would gloat. You knew she'd use your past mistakes as weapons. But she underestimated the one thing that always gave you power. You never forgot a betrayal. You let her think she was the architect of your destruction, when all she ever was the test subject of your survival. The cruiser slowed as it crossed the city limits. It didn't head toward the precinct. It took a right down the old industrial road, where factories once roared and now stood like steel skeletons beneath the moon. You didn't ask why. You knew. Inside your pocket, the trigger was armed. A simple tap. The flash upload began. Hidden files, contracts, audio recordings, boardroom whispers, every betrayal layered in chronological order. The plan wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. They thought arresting you was the end. But in truth, it was your cue. You weren't just ready for this moment. You'd engineered it. As the car came to a stop in front of the old garment factory, you stepped out. The officer handed you your phone, an unregistered titanium build, facial recognition locked to your DNA. "They're already watching," he said. You smiled. The boardroom lights were about to flicker, and they had no idea what was coming. They thought they had all the footage. They believed the security system you installed was their weapon now, turned against you with access she granted them months ago. But they didn't know you rewired the lake house during a fake plumbing repair, and every angle they trusted was mirrored by a hidden server in Zurich. You knew she would try to poison the past, twist your absences into evidence, your silence into guilt, your stillness into danger. That's why the cabin in Vermont, the retreat in Patagonia, and the studio downtown were all fed into the same covert grid. Time-stamped, geo-locked, and motion-activated by your voice pattern alone. They thought the recordings showed paranoia. They didn't realize they revealed precision. Every moment of supposed unraveling was you piecing together what none of them noticed, until it was too late. Her affair was the smallest sin. The real crime was how she sold access to your shadow portfolio. Late-night meetings with boardroom rivals. Audio of her laughing with your former CTO about ending his reign with a padded cell and a scandal. You had it all, clean, unedited, encoded in a video file labeled Tuesday Sunset MP4. She thought she was feeding a corporate wolf pack. In truth, she was dancing with ghosts who never forgave you for outmaneuvering them during the Hexton-Biogen merger. And now, they were back, with her as their proxy executioner. The walls of the lake house had ears. Literally. Acoustic tiles rigged with micro-listeners, disguised as a modern design element she had insisted on. Every lie she whispered into her phone. Every lover she hosted in your absence. Every dollar she shifted offshore in your name. Cataloged. Filed. Synced. You knew that trust wasn't lost. It was given too freely. So you stopped giving it. You replaced it with observation, silence, data. They thought you went quiet because you broke. You went quiet because you started recording. The footage wasn't just insurance. It was currency. With it, you bought immunity from the one person no one dared cross. The police chief whose own son vanished after investing in your rival's crypto fund. The chief owed you. And when the time came, you cashed in that debt. The man who arrested you didn't wear a badge issued by the city. He wore one replicated by your printing division. High resolution, flawless, embedded with tracking nanotech. He knew the route. He knew the story. He knew it wasn't real. But they didn't. They, the concerned colleagues, who secretly resented your rise, The board members who always wanted you out but never found the leverage. The competitor who toasted her betrayal like it was a wedding. They watched from afar, thinking this was the fall. They thought you didn't know about the hidden camera in the Roquefort jar in her private kitchen fridge, or the lawyer she met on the 37th floor of the El Tara Hotel, where you paid the concierge to plug in your listening device disguised as a coat hook. They thought you didn't know because you never acted, but you didn't need to act. You just needed to watch. Surveillance isn't just about knowing. It's about choosing when they learn you know. The call you made from the fake police cruiser wasn't to your lawyer. It was to the vault. The vault was your legacy fallback, a fail-safe, built with ex-intelligence contractors turned investment partners. When activated, it pushes a 3-phase exposure plan. First, the soft leak. Emails sent to anonymous journalists, metadata scrubbed, curiosity seeded. Second, the executive crack. Financial inconsistencies quietly forwarded to compliance officers. Third, the hammer. Video, audio, and confession data. In the penthouse suite, her phone lit up at 11:43 p.m. She didn't recognize the address. She didn't know the server. But she saw your face, staring into the camera, time-stamped 2 weeks before she gave her statement to the DA. You said, "If you're seeing this, the charade is over." She dropped the phone. The glass cracked. Her reflection split. You weren't broken. You were watching. Every step she took to protect herself was a step deeper into your net. Her friends were watching your downfall on mute while messaging her in panic about the video. Her lover tried to delete his cloud account, but the download was already in motion. They thought they erased you, but ghosts don't disappear. They observe, they wait, and when the time is right, they haunt. In the garage of the lake house, behind the tool rack, the server light blinked red. Upload. Complete. Every image, every signature, every confession. Transferred. You walked into the garment factory, the lights dimmed by dust, the air stale with old sweat and burnt rubber. The fake cop handed you the second phone. Encrypted, silent. On the screen, 3 words. Signal came through. Phase 2. A judge in Florida received an anonymous tip. A compliance officer at Cygnus Global flagged an urgent discrepancy. A clerk at the SEC printed a file labeled Blue Serpent. Her name was on all 3. The boardroom lights began to flicker. And you weren't even there. They thought you were in custody. But custody is just a word, and freedom was never something they could take from you. You knew he'd step in, but not like that. The room was cold when the police chief entered, his footsteps muted by leather soles, his presence louder than any siren. She blinked 3 times and backed, into the mahogany paneling, as if the grain itself might shield her. They thought this was protocol. But his eyes didn't scan you like a threat. They scanned her, and the silence that followed was an indictment louder than gunfire. Years ago, when the chief's son disappeared during that synthetic asset collapse, everyone assumed he'd run. A broken investor chasing glory. But you knew, the signatures, the routing paths, the deliberate timing of server wipes tied to Shellfire equity. The fund her new allies used to siphon millions from hopeful fools like him. You tracked the gaps. You followed the code buried in dormant domains, and you brought him what no one else could. Proof his son didn't vanish. He was vanished. By them. That truth cost you 3 years in the shadows. 2 betrayals you pretended not to notice. 100 favors called in from people who forgot you were still pulling strings. But it was enough. The chief owed you more than thanks. He owed you justice. And now, Justice walked in wearing a badge and holding a folder with the Shellfire equity, sigil burned into the manila like a scar. The police officer stood straighter. She turned pale. The silence cracked. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and laid out a single photo on the table. Her lover, arms wrapped around a woman who wasn't her, in a villa paid for with your offshore fund. Beneath it, the wire transfers. Beneath that, a notary stamp showing your forged signature. The betrayal wasn't emotional. It was logistical, cold, calculated, and exposed. She whispered something like a plea, but her voice broke halfway through. The chief didn't look at her. He looked at you and said, "It's time." They thought this was the beginning of your end. They didn't see it was the beginning of hers. You stepped outside into air that smelled like burned ink and sour lemon, the scent of panic in opulent spaces. The surveillance SUV, painted like a delivery van, opened silently. Inside, hard drives, optical backups, a single bulletproof folder containing everything from your marriage license to her secret prenup. You knew about the clause. The one she filed with her offshore attorney in Curacao timed perfectly with your supposed institutionalization. If you were declared unstable for longer than 72 hours, she got everything. Your shares, your patents, even your silence. But you'd never been unstable. You'd been watching. They thought the garage footage was erased, but there were mirrors. On the ceiling. Polished aluminum panels angled just so. And in those reflections, her, whispering into the burner phone, reading off account numbers, coordinating the hit on your name and legacy. Her lover was the notary. The CTO's assistant was the forger. The chain of betrayal reached deeper than you expected, but not deeper than you prepared for. You waited until the audit, until the global books closed for the quarter, and all movement would leave digital footprints in wet cement. And when you triggered the vault, those steps lit up like blood under ultraviolet light. The police chief didn't need a warrant. He needed closure. And your dossier gave him that in a language his badge understood. Phase 3 initiated the moment the folder touched the SEC's hands. The first domino wasn't a financial one. It was a headline. CEO's wife tied to Shellfire scheme. Whistleblower. Emerges. You weren't named. Not yet. But she was. And the face that had smiled beside you in Fortune magazine, that stood with you at biotech galas and fundraising balls, was now front-page rot, painted in criminal strokes. You sat in the van, doors closed, everything quiet. The driver handed you headphones. You put them on. The feed played. Her voice, caught live in a meeting you weren't invited to. Once the audit flags him, he'll be institutionalized by Thursday. That gives us just enough time to clean out the Zurich shelf and move the patents through Amber Lane. Logistics. No one will trace it. He won't even know it's gone. The room laughed. A toast followed. Glasses clinked. Then silence. Then your voice. Recorded from a speaker embedded in the conference table. I always knew you liked red wine. Betrayal suits you. Panic, chairs scraped, footsteps, shouting. Too late. That recording was live-streamed to every board member of Blackwell Industries, her new corporate ally. The same board that once courted you. The same board that now realized they were backing a thief who stole from the very man they feared. They thought they were co-opting a queen. They had invited in a bomb. And now it was detonating. The boardroom. Lights flickered. The head of compliance grabbed his phone. The CTO's assistant tried to run. She just stood there, frozen, because she knew it was over. Not just the marriage. Not just the fortune, the narrative, the power. The years of playing innocent, of twisting stories, of smiling through destruction, dissolved by a signal, by a ghost, by you. You leaned back in the van as the driver pulled into the underground access tunnel leading to the vault facility. The walls shimmered in passing red light, like veins beneath skin. The hum of justice echoed louder than any siren now. Outside, the police chief walked into the precinct, folder in hand, past the officers who once took you in under false pretenses. No words were spoken. Only the echo of your final message, now flooding inboxes, newsrooms, regulatory agencies, and encrypted judicial servers. The signal came through. They thought the van was yours, part of your slow, calculated climb back from ruin. But it wasn't. It was hers. Registered through a Delaware shell company, parked 2 blocks from your townhouse, used for late-night calls she didn't want traced. You knew before she did. The moment the audit pinged discrepancies in the Ember Lane. Logistics timeline, the signal came through. One of your dead man relays pinged off an old friend's satnet. The location matched exactly. The van had been sitting idle for 14 days, but the inside showed signs of use. The feed was encrypted. AES-256, routed through a South Korean gaming server. Sloppy. You knew her style had shifted once she brought in Harrow. He wasn't a fixer, just a thief with a press pass. His surveillance methods were fast and cheap, unlike yours. Where he used drones and burner mics, you used the hum of fluorescent lights to piggyback radio frequencies. You were still 10 steps ahead, but he was the reason that van was there. And that van was why the boardroom toast had a third voice laughing behind the door. Harrow, so you tracked him. You didn't need to see his face. His heat signature was enough. The way he leaned forward when nervous, the sweat bloom around the collar. He was in the van 46 minutes before the police chief arrived. And he uploaded something. 9 gigabytes. Probably a failsafe. But you corrupted it mid-transfer. That's the part she never knew. You had an AI ghost living in her cloud. Not a virus, a parasite. It didn't steal. It nested. Mimicked her tone, her click patterns, even her writing style. Every file she ever flagged, opened, deleted, or moved to offline servers. You saw it. Real time. With timestamps, with intent. The surveillance van wasn't yours, but the signal it captured now belonged to you. You played it back as the vault door opened, security scanning your retina with its soft green glow. The facility was silent, one of 4 locations on the eastern seaboard capable of offline containment. The power here was analog, the doors triple locked with titanium teeth. Inside, a single briefcase. White. Sealed. She thought she had it routed, through a ghost identity. A woman named Cassandra Bell, deceased in Prague, resurrected in Panama with full trading authority over your biotech research patents. You knew that name. You created it 15 years ago as a firewall against hostile takeovers. It was never meant to be found, but she found it. Or rather, Harrow did, and she tried to sell it. Tried.